Day 31 started by going downstairs, where I found an intruder that climbed through the broken window. After pushing him to the ground, I went outside in order to avoid having corpses inside the base. Moments later, I dealt with the troublemaker. While unloading my truck from the yesterday loot, another one reached the entrance of my property and I killed him promptly. Next, I continued moving the loot in their respective containers in the base. While doing so, I also added 3 crates to the other corner near the entrance. I started using the first for materials used to repair and sharpen tools like glue, file, epoxy, and adhesive tape. After opening the cartoon of nails, in order to get 12 boxes of nails, I started to use the second container for carpentry supplies and tools. While in the third, special materials like oxygen tanks and circular saw blades. Past 1 AM, I finished unloading the truck and left in its glove box any tool I might need on my future loot runs. While at 3 AM, I finally finished sorting the last loot batch in their corresponding containers and went to sleep. The next day I woke up at 10 AM and decided to drive back to the large warehouse for more loot. On my way there in the small neighborhood, I had to fight a few fresh spawns. To be precise, there was 2 of them. One died after climbing over the fence, while the other, after some struggle, finally gave up and fall on the ground, only to die the next moment. Later, on the other side of the road, I found 2 extra to defeat in the center of the lawn. Moving to the driveway, I had another 2. Finally, the surrounding was quiet. This is why I went back in my car and kept driving. Before reaching the warehouse, I had to get out and deal with the next one that was blocking the right road line. He had a digital watch to loot. Moments later, I had to fight with 2 on the other side of the road. One of them was a soldier, from whom I obtained a hunting t-shirt, followed by a bullets bandolier containing 1 5.56 round. From the same corpse, I obtained a boonie hat I equipped, followed by a belt and a spare pair of military elbow pads. Once I was done, a civilian came from behind my car. From this one, I obtained a fillet knife and a watch. After finally parking my truck in front of the warehouse entrance, I decided to check if there is some troubles around the building. This led me to the back entrance where I found just 1 zombie banging on the door. To prevent that migration screws me over, I decided to check the highway behind the warehouse. This allowed me to spot a group of 4 and soon after they started chasing me. They were too slow and too close to each other's. For this reason, I started to fight them normally. After only 3 hits, my mallet was done for. Switching to the hatchet, I was able to quickly kill 2 of them and push to the ground the 3rd. I messed up my positioning. This allowed the 3rd to get on his feet, while I was trying to drop the 4th. But after a little bit of extra struggle, they were finally dead. While looting their corpses beside the usual stuff, I also found a decent magazine to read to increase my mood. Later, I dropped the broken mallet and went inside the warehouse so I could get some loot from it. In front of the fridge, on the ground, I found a tire iron. This tool is used to remove tires from a car. Next, near the plastic chairs, I found an empty sack. After taking some water from the restroom, I noticed a steel bar half near its doorway. While in front of the metal shelves, there was a knee pad to loot. While checking the crates in front of the metal shelves, I found only some paint, and this time I decided to collect every single bucket I find. Once done, I went to the central crates pile. Here I picked up the one in the second line. This allowed me to reach the central one from line 1 to 3. From those, besides some more paint, I obtained a bolt cutter from the first, a box of nails from the second, and a seed pocket to grow cabbages. After that, I was full, so I went to my truck to unload in its trunk what I collected so far. Later, I moved in for the second round of looting. This led to find from the first container a rake, some nuts and bolts, followed by some vase grips, hand fork and hacksaw from the second. The third has only a dust mask. At this point was time to pick up the next pile of crates from the 4th line in order to reach the next batch of loot. This resulted in reaching my weight limits, so I had to deposit the new loot in my car. A few moments later, I was back in the warehouse to check the new line of crates. This allowed me to find some respirator filter, half mask and carpentry chisel I collected from the first crate. followed by a welding torch and oxygen tank from the second, wheat seeds from the third, and a small handle from the fourth. But the most important loot was in the fifth, that had a carpentry volume 3 inside. The rest of weight capacity was filled by a lot of paint that I found in the other containers, and at almost 4 PM I went to unload the loot I had on me. This resulted in filling up the trunk, and I had to place the rest on my passenger seat. A few minutes later I was back for more. From the first crate I got 2 sacks of sand, while after taking the screwdriver from the second I had to pick up a few crates to reach a few more to check. In the first I found a hacksaw and a plastering trowel. This is a new item in Build 42, and I think that I will need it to plaster wooden walls. Anyway, from the second crate I got a hand drill, a pair of elbow pads and a box of nails. The rest of the loot along this side of the central crate lines yielded only some extra paint, while on the ground at its end there was some calipers. This is another new item in Build 42 that I don't have a clue if it has any uses. In doubts as usual I picked it up. Later, in front of the back doors I found an empty sack on the ground to pick up. Plus there was also a steel sheet and a lug wrench nearby. The last one is a tool used to change vehicle tires. My truck and I was full, therefore it was time to drive back home. By the way, I didn't spot a single zombie while reaching my base. Anyway, when I was back at moving the new loot inside my base, I initially tried to fit all of the paint in the same crate I used for plaster and wallpaper powder. Plus I added in this crate the plastering trowel as well. Upstairs I also added 2 crates near my melee weapons storage. Then I placed down one along the hallway downstairs, mainly to separate all of paint I have from the rest of the loot. Later I added 3 more in front of the barbecue, followed by another 2 along the hallway. After that I noticed that I stopped gaining weight. To fix this I ate a bag of chips. Around 10 PM I decided that it was a good idea to go to sleep to save some flashlight batteries. I was able to sleep till 4 AM, and considering that my truck was somewhat empty, I decided to go back to the warehouse. On my way there, after the crossroad, I noticed a new spawn on the driveway of the first property to the right. Time to push him to the ground that I had to react to an ambush. Once both were dead, I was able to obtain a kitchen knife from one of them. After that, I drove till the end of this neighborhood and had to deal with another new spawn in the last property to the left. While near the electrical booth, there was an extra 2 to kill. Once done, I was able to continue looting the warehouse again. I started from removing the battery and then picking up the radio placed on top of the central crate. Then on the ground in front of it, I was pleased to find a machete, but unfortunately it was in really bad conditions. Close to it I also found a magazine that teaches the growing seasons of some flowers, plus a metalworking punch in worn conditions. Later I heard someone near my car, so I had to get out and deal with the troublemaker. After that, I went back to loot. From the first crate in the central pile, I found a bag of concrete powder. For now in Build 42, you can use it to make some weapons. Moving on, in the second crate, I found 2 extra bags of concrete powder. The third had a screwdriver and a dust mask. A small file set and some pliers was to be found in the fourth. A full propane tank with an iron bar quarter was in the fifth. Those were heavy items, so I had to deposit them in my vehicle trunk. To the west from the entrance in the building, I had to kill a newcomer before checking the next crates. This time from the first I obtained a hand drill and a gardening trowel. Then I decided to check the ground. This allowed me to find a twine and a seed pocket to grow onions, followed by a wood saw, some paint and a bag of plaster powder. Moving a little bit further I was able to find a seed pocket to grow chives, a screwdriver, a pipe wrench and a box of nails. The pipe wrench is mainly used to connect the rain catchers to the sink and allow the water to be filtered and purified. Moving closer to the central crates I found another box of nails on the ground. Then finally decided to check more crates, starting from the first that had some rat poison, while the second had some small punch and chisel set. There was nothing else in the central crates, so it was time to check the southern side of the warehouse. This allowed me to find a propane bottle and some epoxy in the first crate, a bag of plaster powder in the second, a bag of wallpaper paste powder from the third, a gardening trowel and a crowbar from the fourth, a steel sheet from the fifth, a welder mask and a steel rod from the sixth, a propane bottle, an iron bar half and some calipers from the seventh, some safety googles and hacksaw from the eighth, 2 bags of plaster powder from the ninth, a small handle, 1 knee pad and a dust mask from the 10th, a steel piece and a screwdriver from the 11th. At this point, I was again full and went back to my truck to deposit this loot. As soon as I went back inside, I found one of the best items in the game to prevent the nasty cold. I speak about the old stove. This device is used to heat up a room and prevent the freezing moodle and sleep in a warm bedroom. Anyway, once moved it inside my truck, I checked the last group of crates. This allowed me to find a sack of sand in the first, a welding torch and rake in the second, a seed pocket required to grow some leek, plus another copy of a magazine that I already have in the third, a welding mask, an oxygen tank and an iron bar half in the fourth, a wood mallet and a leaf rake in the fifth, a wire and iron bar half in the last crate. At this point, I had some extra space to check what can be found upstairs, but the only loot up here was on the ground and it was an empty sack, plus a bag of plaster powder, a medium handle, a plastering trowel, a small steel sheet, a club hammer, a box of nails, some wood glue, a ball-peen hammer and a long stick. I got every single useful loot from this warehouse, and it was finally time to sign this location as looted. After that, it was time to drive all the way to my base. I was glad to see that no Zeds were to be seen on my way back home. Once in front of the main entrance, it was time to eat another bag of chips to force myself to gain weight. After that, I placed down a crate to the right side from the entrance in the living room. Then in the last crate of the hallway, I deposited all of the bag of plaster, concrete and wallpaper powder I found so far. This allowed me to have 2 crates in the corner to the left from the entrance. I used this to separate the metalworking items that can be used as a weapon from the rest of the supplies. Back to the kitchen, I placed the 3rd crate in its corner and another 2 near the exit, plus a 3rd near the melee weapons drawer. I started using the 1st for axes and hatchets, the 2nd for wrenches and the 3rd for hammers. Around 4 PM, I finished unloading the truck and again my weight gain was stopped, forcing me to eat another bag of chips. After that, I had to fight a Zed that broke in my property. Then past 5 PM I was done, but I was tired. To not risk it and take a small break, I decided to read all of the magazines that teaches something I have, to avoid carrying dead weight on me. Then I started also the Carpentry Volume 1. Past 7 PM and a half, it was too dark to continue. So I reached my barbecue and placed in one of its crates the magazines that I will use to lit up the fire for cooking. Finally, after some few minutes of loot reorganization, I went to bed.